It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
Welcome to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. So glad you're joining us today. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. It's going to be a real interesting show, so stick with us. You'll learn something on this show. You'll be a little bit smarter when this 30 minutes is over. So we're going to stuff a lot of information into the show, as I said. Important information from U of L faculty, as well as some interesting and fun things going on at the University of Louisville. So if you attend the men's or women's basketball games, you'll have an opportunity to sing an old Bee Gees song, yes, an old Bee Gees song, and learn how to save a life in the process. We'll be talking about that. The renowned love doctors from U of L will be here to talk about an upcoming event. And Laura Rothstein from the law school will share some history about a great Supreme Court justice who was born in Louisville, Mr. Brandeis, and why this year is a special one regarding Brandeis and the University of Louisville. But first, you've heard of the world health crisis surrounding the Zika virus, I'm sure, which has now spread to 24 different countries in the Americas and into the U.S. It's carried by mosquitoes, and it has impacted as many as 4,000 people in Brazil. U of L's Ruth Carrico works with refugees in Louisville and is a national expert on these global health problems. So we're going to talk about the Zika virus with Ruth Carrico, and I did that a few days ago. Here's that interview. I'm actually sitting on the campus of the University of Louisville and talking to Ruth Carrico. So we're out of the studio at this moment, but Ruth, we're going to talk about something that has really come up quickly on the worldwide health stage, the Zika virus. And Ruth is the head of the Global Health Center at the University of Louisville, so you pay attention to these things. What can you tell us about the Zika virus?
Well, it's creating a big problem, as you said. So here's a virus that is affecting the most vulnerable, our kids, unborn children. So that's, I think, what's really captured the world's attention. Although this virus has been around, we've known about it for quite some time, but now we're seeing the effect on unborn children. So specifically, we're seeing that pregnant women that have become infected, then we're seeing then the early birth or miscarriage or delivery of babies that have very small heads, underdeveloped brains, microcephaly.
Should we be worried about this in the United States? People in Louisville, should they be worried about the Zika virus?
Well, I think anytime anything of public health importance is going on anywhere in the world, we have to realize that we are not immune. Now, from several perspectives. Number one, we have a lot of international travel. You know, we have a very big, a very active international travel clinic. So we see a number of people that are preparing for overseas travel, whether it's studying abroad, business, leisure, mission trips, or whatever, that are planning to go to one of these impacted areas. So certainly it's important with respect to your safety when you travel. Now on the other side, well, what happens as we are watching the surveillance results, and as we are seeing then those countries that are becoming affected where we have identified not only the virus but transmission via the bite of the mosquito, the list of those countries now have crept right up to the U.S. border, and then now we've seen several cases in the U.S. So certainly it is of a concern. It is a problem virus. It has a severe impact. What is going to happen with this? That's still, I wish I had a crystal ball.
And as I've seen in the news, at least, it appears, as you pointed out earlier, that it is striking pregnant women or women who are pregnant and having babies. They're being born with these deformities and other things. What impact does it have on you and I? We're healthy, we're not pregnant, well, at least as far as I know. So what impact would it have on healthy Americans to perhaps travel to Brazil and bring this back to them? What would happen?
Well, I think the thing to remember that it's not only pregnant women that are impacted. Others have become ill and have developed a paralyzing illness called Guillain-Barré. So it's not only pregnant women, but in addition, women who have not yet become pregnant but are of childbearing years can become infected, and we don't really know. How long is it then if I'm infected, if I become ill? How long do I need to wait then before I become pregnant in order to make sure that my unborn child, my fetus, is safe? We still don't know that. So the what ifs are still looming very large in front of us. All we do know is that this is a big problem, a big public health concern. It's so big, in fact, that the World Health Organization is meeting to try to determine, how big of a button do we push with respect to this illness.
Could this become as big as Ebola?
Well, I think it's certainly very different from Ebola, but it will, and I'm sure already has, caused the remnants of a very similar concern, where it's hard for us to realize that, you know, we have good health care, we have a good public health process here in the U.S. We're very fortunate. And then now when we see something happening outside the U.S., many times we think, oh, wow, that's really bad, but we don't think of it in terms of affecting us. Now it's affecting us, and it will affect us in many ways. It's not only that we travel, but it's going to affect business travelers. That will affect us economically. So certainly we will feel the effects of this outbreak, and it's certainly, I think people need to realize that it is an outbreak.
Right. All right, we're talking with Ruth Carrico, who's the head of the Global Health Center at the University of Louisville. Should people travel to South America? That's the place, Central America and South America, where it has apparently hit the hardest. Right. Should Americans just say, well, I was going to go to Guatemala or Brazil, I'm just not going to go? Should they do that?
Well, when we see people in the travel clinic, we're very upfront with them, because our responsibility in the travel clinic is to try to make sure that your experience is not only fun, but it's also safe. And so we're telling people now that this is really a serious issue. If you are a pregnant woman, if you are a woman that is considering pregnancy, then, you know, we will just almost go to the mat with you over that and say, please do not go. Others, we are advising, no, that they do not go, that they pick another destination, simply because anyone can be impacted by this. We know most people are asymptomatic, but we don't know what that means, which means they don't feel the effects. They don't feel the sore joints, the achiness, the fever. They don't develop pink eye, some of the rash that helps us be able to characterize this as infection. They may have been bitten. They may have experienced some symptoms, but really not recognize it. Nevertheless, they are infected. Well, we don't really know what that means over a longer period of time. So, you know, right now we're saying, you know, if you have the ability to choose somewhere else, then give some strong consideration to doing that. If it's something that you must do or you don't want to consider something else, then we are really focusing on what are the precautions that you can take if you're going to travel. What are those mosquito precautions that may provide you with some benefit, but we know nothing is going to be 100%.
We're talking about the Zika virus, which has no vaccine right now.
Correct.
To your knowledge, is there work in progress in different countries, perhaps in the U.S., on a vaccine for the Zika?
Well, there isn't anything that is publicized, but we know with diseases that, right, you know, research and development, there are a lot of vaccines that are underdeveloped or at least under consideration in that pipeline. But we know from the time somebody first thinks this would be a good idea to the time that is available for us to administer or receive, it's years.
So final message to folks sitting in Louisville listening to this program about the Zika virus. What would you tell them? What advice would you give? Well,
I would say, first of all, keep your eye on what's happening. You know, listen to what is occurring, listen to the public health messaging that comes across. Maybe not what you're hearing on, you know, anybody that's sensationalizing this, but try to come up with, you know, what are the facts?
What's logical?
Right, and then try to think about, well, what does this mean to me? And what are my risks? And then all of us have to decide, you know, how much risk are we willing to accept? How much is too much? And in that case, we may say, we don't go there, or we become more involved. Now, it will pretty soon be summertime, and we'll be worrying about mosquitoes, just in the normal sense. So this is another reminder that when the health department, or we start reading in the Courier Journal, hearing on the news about what do we do to minimize mosquitoes in our own yards, then maybe we'll take that seriously. You know, standing water and cleaning out gutters and all those sorts of things. So, you know, it helps us kind of push the reset button and put public health in general in a new perspective.
So it's coming to the U.S. Don't know how bad. Pay attention. That's
Correct.
Pretty much it. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Ruth Carrico, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks
Appreciate
much.
it.
All right.
Thank you. This year marks the 100th anniversary of Louisville native Louis Brandeis being appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and UofL is marking that occasion. Laura Rothstein is a professor in the Brandeis School of Law and a big fan of the former justice, as I understand. Is that correct, Laura?
I'm a huge fan.
All right. So you've learned everything there is to know about Louis Brandeis.
Well, there's always new things to know. I'm finding that out. But I have the pretty good idea of the big picture. But there's so much that it's very hard to sort of encapsulate one thing. But this is a really special year because on January 28th, which was last week, we had the 100th anniversary of his nomination when Woodrow Wilson nominated him to the Supreme Court. And the nomination took 4 months to approve, the longest approval process in history of the Supreme Court. And some people think it was because he was Jewish, but it is probably more because he was so progressive. And the powers that be, the big money, were very wary of having someone who was that savvy, that smart, that persuasive, that effective being in a position on the Supreme Court. So we celebrated that at the law school, which I annually do a talk for the law students about Louis Brandeis and his being from Louisville and his impact on our university and our law school and our community. And we're very, very lucky to have that connection. So our law students must do 30 hours of public service before they graduate, and it's a big draw.
All right, give me a little background on Brandeis. He grew up in Louisville. Where did he grow up, and what was his family like? Were they all a bunch of lawyers, or how did he become a lawyer and a Supreme Court justice?
Well, his family weren't a bunch of lawyers. His uncle was, but not his parents. His father was a grain merchant, and Louis was born in 1856, and he was the youngest of 4 siblings. His first memories are his mother helping his mother serve food and coffee to Union soldiers on his front yard. And that really sticks with me because his value of service, his commitment to service, goes back to that, in my view, that he watched his mother doing service. He helped his mother do service. They were serving food to people who were serving their country. So I think those kinds of things and the influence of his family. His mother influenced his views on culture and his interest in culture. His father was a very good businessman. And his father understood the value of building relationships. So when he would go out into the country to build relationships with the people who would sell him grain, Louis sometimes went along, and he observed that building that relationship was key. So I think all of those things were background for who he became and why he became what he was. He went to Male High School, and then after the Civil War, the family business was on harder times, so the parents took them back to Europe. Well, he'd never been to Europe, but took the family to Europe. And they spent a couple of years there where he finished his, what would be kind of the equivalent of high school and college, and then came back to the United States, went to Harvard Law School, graduated at age 20, the youngest person to graduate and the highest grade point average, and really remarkable. The rest of his family came back to Louisville. And although Louis never came back to live here, he remained very connected. He corresponded, and we have his letters in our law library archives, which is very, very special, his personal letters. And he corresponded with his mother almost every day. His older brother came back and took over the family business, his siblings. And he did come back quite a bit, and he valued this community very, very highly. He gave papers to not just the law school, but to other departments at the university.
What were some of the big decisions, or what role did he play on that Supreme Court? Was he a liberal? Was he conservative in today's terms? I just asked you 3 different questions, but tell me about on the Supreme Court.
He's actually, in you're looking at his Supreme Court decisions, he's probably most known for his dissents, because his dissents then later became the majority opinion because he was so persuasive and so effective at writing them. Probably the one that is the most connected with him is the dissent in a case involving privacy, the wiretapping case, and the Olmstead case. And that was, I think, I'm trying to remember the exact year it was, but he had written, as a young attorney, a book or an article with his law partner called Right to Privacy. Not a book, but a law review article. It's the second most cited law review article in history of the United States. And there is no such term as privacy in the Constitution, but because of that article and how it was used to build on those thoughts and those ideas, the right to be left alone, the right to have a private space, which is such a current issue today with Facebook and all of that, and paparazzi, and that was just one of many of his ideas that are very current today. So that idea of privacy then came into play when he was on the Supreme Court. He didn't think corporate world or government should be too big, so he would have balanced the state-federal role. He would have balanced the role of the small businessman, and so those are just some examples of what he's known for.
So for my third question of the triumvirate I just asked you there, the third question was, would he be considered a liberal or a conservative in today's Supreme Court justice terms?
He would probably be considered a liberal. I mean, he was considered a progressive, and he believed in using government for social justice, but he also believed in individual responsibility, which some people would say is a more of a conservative kind of viewpoint. But the justices that currently most closely identify with him would be considered in the liberal wing of the Supreme Court: Justice Breyer, Justice Ginsburg, and Kagan, and so on.
And he served on the court for how many years?
He served until 1939, and he died in 1941.
So 2 years after he left the court, he died.
2 years after he left the court. And he began on the court when he was almost 60 years old, which is, a lot of people are planning their retirement at 60, but he remained quite a significant force, and even he wasn't always in the dissenting view, but when he did dissent, and he was very selective when he would write a dissent, because his goal was to educate. And his education was then very valuable as later courts adopted what he thought. One of the other things that he is known for as an advocacy before the court, and this is before he went on the court, was the Brandeis Brief. And that was a model of using social science and economics to make a legal argument. And he was an advocate before the court in a case involving women's working hours in the state of Oregon. And that technique was then used by the NAACP in the cases that led after Brown versus Board of Education, very specifically. And people talk about the Brandeis Brief, and that's what they mean.
We need to wrap up. Before I let you go, you've got to talk about the gravesite in front of the law school.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked me that. When I do my talk for my students every year, I tell them about his favorite foods, and there were waffles and donuts and so on, but animal crackers were one of his favorite foods. And I tell them that every year. And a couple of years after I did that, one of the faculty librarians said, there's a box of animal crackers out on the grave. And because the students also put pennies and money there as good luck before they have exams.
I think people don't even know that there's a grave there.
There is he chose to be buried in the portico of our law school. So the animal crackers are there, and if you go out one day, the box might be there, but the animal crackers will be gone because the squirrels have come and eaten them.
Maybe the white squirrels.
The white squirrels.
White squirrels got the animal crackers. But yes, his grave is there, and there's something about putting pennies. Did law school students put pennies on the grave for good luck or something?
They put money there as good luck, and then that one year they started putting animal crackers. So every now and then I'll go out and see a box of animal crackers.
Yeah, so as you're walking in the front door to the Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville, look down, because right there, that's where he's buried, right?
Right.
All right. Laura Rothstein, thanks so much for being on the program. Very interesting little history about Louis Brandeis. As I teased at the start of the show, we're going to talk about Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. All right, Staying Alive by the Bee Gees, how it fits into CPR and how you can save a life. And with me is Laurel Brown, who's with the School of Medicine at the University of Louisville. And you also have a really big, long title, some other title. What's the other title, Laurel, that you have?
Well, I'm Dr. Laurel Brown. I guess that's my first title.
Okay,
there you go. And I am the physician champion for resuscitation with University of Louisville Hospital, which means I'm in charge of trying to bring dead people back to life.
Well, that's a good thing to do.
Fabulous.
Especially if you can bring dead people back to life.
That's my job.
All right, now you're going to help us bring dead people back to life. So why don't you tell us about what you've got scheduled coming up here at a couple of the basketball games and out in the community.
Absolutely. So we are trying to basically blanket and canvas our community with people who are knowledgeable about bystander CPR. People have probably heard about CPR, which means cardiopulmonary resuscitation. That's chest compressions and trying to get someone's heart beating when it's stopped. We want our community to be able to perform what we call hands-only CPR if they happen to see somebody drop and collapse in front of them. And so when we come to the basketball games, the women's game on the 15th and the men's game on the 17th, we're actually going to be not only increasing awareness about hands-only CPR, but we're also going to be offering 5-minute training sessions so that in just 5 minutes you can learn the basic principles of hands-only CPR.
So at the basketball games then, if I show up, are you going to call me down to the floor at halftime and say, all right, we're going to teach you how to do this? Is it out in the hallways? How do I do this?
We're going to call some people down to the floor at halftime,
Okay.
including yours truly. However, we're also going to have booths set up in various places throughout the area, and you can come when you're on a break or before or after the game, and you can come and learn how to do this bystander hands-only CPR in just 5 minutes or less.
All right, now I was in college from 1977 to 1981. The Gibb brothers were hot then, the Bee Gees were big. So explain how you're going to use the Bee Gees to teach me and Brad and everybody else that's in this room how to do CPR.
Well, it's very convenient that the song Stayin' Alive, which everybody knows, happens to be exactly the right beat for doing hands-only CPR. The message is good, staying alive, and the beat is exactly what we recommend from the American Heart Association. So what we recommend is that if you see someone collapse and they're not responsive, you do two things. The first is call 911, get some professionals on the way. And then the second one is to push hard and fast right in the center of the chest, and you push to the beat of the song, Stayin' Alive, Stayin' Alive.
So do you have someone singing it for you while you're doing, hey man, do Stayin' Alive. Do you know Stayin' Alive while you're doing it, or you're sitting there going, Stayin' Alive? Is that what?
CPR is so hard to perform that you will be out of breath and unable to sing, so I recommend singing it in your head.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about CPR and why it's so necessary to train people in CPR. And I think I read some statistic that Louisville as a city is not real good about providing bystanders CPR. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, we are not quite meeting the national average when it comes to performing CPR when someone drops dead in front of us. So the statistics tell us that every hour, 38 Americans will have a cardiac arrest. Only 1 in 10 of those people will survive. And the most important thing that determines if they survive is whether someone sees them and then starts doing CPR. We as a community are not quite meeting that national average, and so that's part of why we're making this big effort, is we'd like for everyone to at least be familiar with what CPR is, so that if you happen to see someone go down, you can help them.
So what is the average in Louisville? Did you? I think I missed that. Did you tell me?
Well, it ranges.
Out of the 100 people that have a cardiac arrest on the sidewalk in Louisville, how many of those will have someone stop and start immediately CPR?
Well, it ranges by zip code. Some places at 0% in some zip codes in our county.
Nobody, huh?
And some places it's up to 57%. The national average is right around 30%, and we in general here in Jefferson County, Louisville metro area, we hit somewhere around 15 to 20% depending upon the year. So we have some work to do. Okay,
and so what do you tell people? That would say, well, I'm a little worried, I don't want to get involved, I'm afraid somebody will sue me if I do something wrong. What do you tell them?
Well, first of all, you don't have to worry about getting sued. We have something called Good Samaritan laws that protect anybody who's trying to help, doing their best faith effort to help someone that's in a medical emergency. The importance about this hands-only CPR is that it kind of eliminates that concern about mouth-to-mouth and am I going to be transmitting or getting anything that's a communicable disease? Exactly. And so hands-only CPR, it just focuses on just do the chest compressions, and pretty much anyone can do that without hurting the person in any way.
Okay, we're talking to Laurel Brown from the UofL School of Medicine, and also has a big long title, basically in charge of resuscitation at the University of Louisville Hospital. How many folks die from cardiac arrest in Louisville or in Kentucky each year? Do you know that figure, or?
Unfortunately, I can make it broader. Unfortunately, we don't have the numbers for Kentucky in general. In Louisville, in the year 2014, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly.
Do you have a ballpark figure?
I have a ballpark figure in the U.S. Okay. So in the U.S., about 250,000 people a year suffer a cardiac arrest. Well, this is different than a heart attack.
Okay.
This is when the heart, a heart attack is when the blood stops flowing to the heart, and you can actually get through that with having some chest pain and some other issues. Okay. A cardiac arrest is when the heart stops beating completely.
Full arrest.
Sometimes because of a heart attack.
I got you. Okay. And so that's a lot of people in the United States, 250,000.
You got it.
And so if you extrapolate that out into Kentucky, you're probably talking several thousand people
Absolutely.
each year.
Absolutely.
Okay. Where did you learn how to do CPR?
The first time I learned how to do CPR was as a volunteer when I was trying to get into medical school. And these days I get trained by the American Heart Association, but we're trying to make this training more accessible to more people. You might not have 4 hours to spend on a course. That's why we're going to offer you to be at least trained and familiar in 5 minutes time.
All right, once again, Dr. Laurel Brown, what do you have coming up at the UofL basketball games, men's and women's games?
So on Monday, February 15th, we'll be at the women's game. We'll be teaching bystander hands-only CPR. And we'll also be at the men's game on Wednesday, February 17th. We'll be the halftime show, and we'll also be there teaching hands-only CPR.
All right, and if someone wants to get a hold of you and says, hey, I've got a really big group, or my church wants to learn how to do this, how do they do that?
So they can get more information and get in touch with us at KentuckyOneHealth.org/takeittotheheart.
Okay, very good.
No. Take It to the Heart tour. Let me try that again.
Take It to the Heart tour.
KentuckyOneHealth.org/takeittotheheart tour.
That's a long title.
It is a long title.
All right, very good. All right, well, thank you, Dr. Laurel Brown. Appreciate it. All right, thanks for being here, and good luck with the basketball games.
Thanks.
Sitting in front of me are the Love Doctors. Anna Fall and Joe D'Ambrosio are known as the Love Doctors. I don't know how they got that nickname. I'm just going to ask him here in just a second. But they've got an event coming up around Valentine's Day that you may be interested in, especially if you're a senior. So the first question I got to ask you, too, is where'd the Love Doctors come in? How'd you get that title?
Well, it started a couple of years ago when we started doing research on compassionate love. And we did a pretty big study around the city of Louisville and around, actually it ended up going around the globe. And people took our survey and we looked at how people love one another. So we both got the nicknames, the Love Doctors.
And suddenly you're in the media as the Love Doctors, right?
Yes.
Yes. We actually did the story last year at Valentine, or 2 years ago at Valentine, to talk about how compassionate love is shown here in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay, so now we know how compassionate love is shown in Louisville, Kentucky, and Joe and Anna are the Love Doctors. They're faculty members at the University of Louisville, and you've got an event coming up here in a few days. Tell us about it.
So we are at the Institute for Sustainable Health and Optimal Aging, and we have a Optimal Aging lecture series that we run every second Wednesday of the month. And so on February 10 at 11:30 at the University Club, we are going to host a session that talks about what's love got to do with it.
What's love got to do? Don't get me started. I know Brad Knoop's in the room here, and he doesn't want to hear me sing, trust me. But anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So we want to talk about caregiving. And, and everyone talks about caregiver burden, and we want to talk about caregiving satisfaction. If you can figure out how to show love in your caregiving and love yourself while you do that, then maybe caregiving doesn't have to be such a burden.
So this is mainly targeted at seniors and their caretakers, right?
Yes, it is. It is. But, when you talk about love, everybody thinks about romantic love. And the love we're talking about is much bigger. It's compassionate love. So it includes the ability to love someone and lose something, give something up, the ability when you're loving someone to extend to other people, the ability of loving and getting nothing in return, the ability of loving and aligning with what the person needs, and then doing it for a long period of time. So this caregiver workshop is going to focus on that alignment of the caregiver and the person who's receiving care.
So again, who should show up for this thing? It's February 10th at 11:30 at the U Club, but who's your target audience for this?
Anyone who's involved in caregiving. It could be for the mother, it could be for a spouse, it could be... Yeah. It's or just if you know that you're going to eventually be in that position and you want to learn a little bit more about it, please come.
All right. Well, while you're here, since we got another minute or so, tell me what I should do for Valentine's Day. What should I do different for Valentine's Day this year with my wife? Since you're the Love Doctors, help me out here.
Okay.
Make sure you align the needs of your wife with real love, for giving her something that she really need and want, not something that you want to give her.
So don't give her a broom and a mop?
No.
That's not a good idea?
Absolutely not.
Oh.
No.
That's what I was going to do this year. I was going to take her to dinner, too. Does that count?
Does she like that?
Does she like going to dinner?
Yes. Okay, if she likes going to dinner, so you would be aligning with what she wants. So, but spend a couple of days now. You have a couple of days to really spend and look at your wife and think about what can you do for her that's really going to get to her, really going to excite her, and really make her know that you love her.
She really wants to go to a beach in Mexico, but I don't know if I can afford that. So what if I can't do that? Then what do I do?
Give her a bucket of sand and tell her you'll take her next year.
That's a pretty good. Oh, sold. There we go, Brad. We got what we're gonna do. All right, Anna Fall, Joe D'Ambrosio. One more time, the date and time of your event coming up.
Okay.
It's going to be February 10th, Wednesday, between 11:30 and 1 at the University Club. And you can call 852-8953 or visit our website, www.optimalaginginstitute.org.
Okay, thank you very much. Why, just sit there for a second, because we always wrap up these programs with a little tidbit about the University of Louisville. So it's a Did You Know segment. So did you know that U of L's Quiz Bowl team is ranked number 19 in the nation for the 2015-16 season? The team is ranked ahead of Dartmouth, Duke, and Virginia, and is the second highest ranked in the ACC, trailing only Virginia Tech and the Techies. That's pretty good. The Quiz Bowl squad is ranked just one spot below Brown University of the Ivy League. So they're doing pretty well. Isn't that cool?
Good.
Got some smart kids. All right, catch the video of many of these shows on Metro TV, which is the government access channel here in Louisville, Kentucky, or also on KETKY, which is a statewide channel. The podcast are on SoundCloud. You just have to search U of L to find these on SoundCloud. And I just started appearing every Monday morning on WHAS TV's Great Day Live with Terry Miners and Rachel Plass, so you can catch those two around 9:30 every Monday morning, sharing a story about U of L. So thanks to you all for listening. You've been listening to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville.